Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, a jig for drilling your dowels. Well, from time to time in a woodworking project, we need to drill a hole in the end of a dowel. And with myself being a regular model maker, that happens more often than what you would think. So how do you hold the dowels in order to drill the ends? Well, in most cases, I put pads on a pair of almost like channel lock pliers and gently hold them so that I can drill the ends. But that doesn't always work, and in some cases it actually mars the dowel and ruins it for what I need. Not to mention that the metal pliers put a lot of pressure on it, and once the hole is drilled out, there has been times where I got carried away and held it a little too tightly and actually broke the dowel. Well, I saw a guy a little while ago who commented on one of my shows, and he is a model builder and designer as well, and has written a couple books on the subject, and he has a brilliant little jig that he uses to drill out the dowels, and he was nice enough to share it with me, and I would like to share it with you today. So his name is Steve DeVries. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and I will be sure to post a link to his book down below. And guys, let's just get into it with making and marking out this jig. Well, I'm going to be making this jig out of a scrap piece of walnut, and the piece that I have here is 3/8 of an inch thick. It's 2 inches wide, and in my case this is 10 inches long. Really, you only need a 9-inch piece, but I made it a little bit longer. The first thing that we need to do, and I know that the lines aren't going to show up well here on the walnut, but if you follow along with your stock, you'll be fine. We're going to put a dividing center line at 1 inch. And just to be 100% sure that we have that exactly centered, I'm going to mark it from both sides. The first line that we want to make from one end is a mark at 1/2 inch, and that will go right across our stock. Now, the reason I took it out of the clamps is because the clamps are interfering with my Incra rule here. So there you go, we have that mark at 1/2 inch in. Our next marks that will be drawn along here will be placed on our center line. So we're just going to line up our Incra rule here and make sure that we can see our center line through our marking slots. And we're going to be placing a series of marks here. The first one being at 1 1/4, and then 1 3/4, 2 15/16, 3 5/8, 4 7/16, 5 3/8, 6 7/16, 7 5/8, and then the last one at 8 1/2, and the 8 1/2 inch mark will go right across our stock, just as we did on the opposite side. Now, on these marks that go all the way across, in from each edge, we're going to place a mark at 1/2 inch. One on either side. Well, now using a 1-inch circle template, what we're going to do is we're going to draw and round off each end from our center line out to the end of our board. And we'll do it on the other side here as well. And then at this end, we're going to place a mark at 9 inches, which will be our final length dimension, and that is where the edge of our 1-inch template will be marked. You could make it longer if you want, that's completely up to you. Well, now that we have everything marked, you want to center punch every single one of those marks that we've made here on our layout. And it looks like I have missed one of my center marks here, and that center mark will be at 2 5/16. So we'll just add that on here. No harm, no foul. The next step in this process is to drill a series of holes, the ones that you just countersunk. And the way it's going to work is these end ones here that you drew in the center of each of these side panels sort of thing, they will be drilled out with a 1/4 inch brad point bit, and you will drill a through hole, as well as your very first hole in line will also be a 1/4 inch. The holes from this point all the way along our jig increase in size, with the next one being 5/16 and then 3/8, 7/16, 1/2 inch, 5/8 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch, 7/8, and then finally finishing up with a 1-inch hole. And you want to try to make those holes as crisp and clean as you can. So starting with the 5/16 inch hole, we'll move on to the next center punch on our jig. And we'll now move on to 3/8 and then so on and so on all the way to the last hole. Now for the larger sizes here, the 5/8, the 3/4, the 7/8, and the 1-inch, I've changed over to Forstner bits, and you just want to be careful exiting the back end so that you can minimize your tear out. Well, at this time, you should have something that looks like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to install a number 7 reverse tooth blade into our scroll saw. And I'm going to take this over and cut around our 1-inch profiles on both ends and cut through the center line all the way along in between each of our drilled holes here, thus separating our two sides. Well, now that they're separated, give the outside edges a good sanding, but don't sand this flat area here where you've separated the two pieces. Just around these round edges here, and some surface sanding is fine. Well, our next two pieces are 1/4 inch thick maple. They're 1/2 inch wide and they're 1.5 inches long. and we just need to mark a few holes, starting with the center line on each piece at 1/4 inch. We'll just mark it on there, and we'll mark it from the other side just like we did on the other piece in case we have some discrepancies in our measurements. And then from either end, we're going to place a mark on that center line at 1/4 of an inch. And then lastly, what we're going to do is we're going to take a 1/2 inch circle template and we're going to round off each one of these edges just to make it look pretty. And then we'll place the same markings on our other piece. Now with those two marked out, we'll center punch our holes and we're going to drill a 1/4 inch diameter through hole at each end, and as well take it over to the sander and we're just going to round off these edges. Well, the last 4 pieces that you need will be 4 1/4 inch diameter dowels. These ones here are 5/8 of an inch long, and we're going to apply some glue and glue them into our 1/4 inch holes on our walnut pieces. Once we get them installed, we're going to clean up all of the squeeze out and let them dry in place. Well, this next step is optional, but I like the idea, and what that is I've burned all of the hole sizes beside each corresponding half circle so that I know at a glance what size dowel each hole will hold instead of having to test it or guess. That's up to you if you want to do that part. I did. 100% your choice. But that is the jig. That's it. How do you use it? Well, guys, those maple pieces are used as basically removable hinges almost that attach your two sides together at one end or the other. I don't think that I would like to have it on both to hold it unless you need it some kind of hands-free thing, but for me, one end or the other, and all you do is you place your piece of dowel, your smaller piece that you need to drill the hole down through into the corresponding hole, pinch it together, same process or the same concept as pliers, and that holds your dowel while drilling. Simple, yet brilliant. And there you have it. A small parts jig for drilling out shorter pieces of dowel. Guys, this jig is brilliant if you're a model maker. This saves so many problems or avoids so many problems, it's not even funny. If you've ever tried to hold these dowels with your fingers and tried to drill it, you know what a dangerous situation that can be, and this jig completely avoids all of that. If you find that it's not holding tight enough, you can sand the inside flat edge just a little bit where you separated them. Normally the kerf of the blade will be enough to squeeze it in tightly, but if it's not, feel free to sand that off. Steve also gives a recommendation in his build to place a thin layer of rubber cement on the inside arc of each one of those drilled holes to give you that little bit of extra grip, and that's just a brilliant idea, and I will be adding it to my jig. Guys, I want to thank Steve for passing this information along to me, and I hope that if you're interested in building models, Steve has some great books. I'm going to post a link down below because he's done a great job of not only designing but also building these models, and they're spectacular. They're just a lot of fun. So guys, check out that book. You know, support local artists and pass on our craft to others. Guys, I want to thank you for tuning in again this week. I hope you've enjoyed the show. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe and click the bell so that you don't miss notifications of future shows. And guys, I'm going to see you again next week for yet another woodworking video.